there's rugby magazines, there's cricket magazines, there's a flippin' paddling magazine. Like, come on. Like, there are these baristas who are amazing people. Like,
Absolutely.
they should be heroes. They are heroes. Like, they make your day. You walk into a cafe and just their energy is like a shot of espresso for your soul. And come on, these are champions. We got to do this.
I love that so much. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Coffee Made Me Do It podcast. My name is Dario and I'll be hosting most, if not all, of these episodes. Today I'm joined by Iain, Evans and Mel Winter from The Coffee Magazine, South Africa's most prolific coffee publication and an award-winning publication at that. I was very fortunate to sit down with Iain and Mel and get to understand the backstory to their own personal journeys, the Coffee Magazine, and what the future holds for them. I hope you enjoyed this episode. It was great to have this conversation and to get to know people who are behind a coffee publication so many of us know and love. I hope you enjoy. So guys, welcome. Thank you so much, Iain and Mel. It's wonderful to have you here. And what I'm excited to talk to our listeners about today is the backstory of what the South African coffee industry sees all the time, which is the Coffee Magazine. But I don't think many people know, the origin story, like who the people are behind it, and it's going to be pretty cool to get into some of that just now. So thank you for joining me. Before getting into the Coffee Mag, I think it would be a good place it'd be good to start at the beginning, which is a bit of background. Mel, maybe I can start with you.
Sure.
Yeah, like where did you grow up? How did you get here?
Yeah, sure. I grew up on the Bluff, just outside of Durban South, rough and tough, and from the Bluff, as they say. My dad was from the origin. Well, his family was from there, and we grew up there our whole lives, and been a Durban girl, born and bred. Went to primary school there, and then on to Maristella in Durban, and went to UKZN, so really kept it very local.
Nice and local.
And finished my honours degree in media at UKZN, and didn't know what the heck I was going to do with it. And at that point, my dad was into coffee already, and he'd had this dream of starting a roastery. He'd been down to, this was like in the dark ages in South Africa where there were no micro roasteries. It was Origin in Cape Town, and it was Masterton's in PE, and been there, but it was very, very little.
Early days.
Very early days. And he had been bringing in green beans from Ethiopia, actually. Was, I think, one of the first to do it directly to South Africa, so not go through the brokers up through Europe and back down. He went around South Africa selling green beans. And that must have been from like 2006, 2007. And he stumbled upon Masterton's and got to know James down there, and he had this little hole-in-the-wall coffee roastery, and that was what my dad decided he would like to do. And this kind of coincided with the time that I was finishing a media degree and didn't know what I was doing, and I'd worked my way through varsity as a waitress and hostess and in the hospitality trade at one of the local restaurants, actually on the road where we started our roastery. So we decided he wants to roast coffee. I'm kind of at a loose end, and I got into coffee. I'd been selling it at markets for years already, and learned how to make coffee from Ben Carlson, actually. He had a cafe in Glenwood for a few years before that. He and his family lived here, and he sold us his one group Vega, I think, first, and then when they moved overseas, we got their Lamazoko GB5, which is still at the Bean Green today. I learned how to make espressos and kind of fell in love with the whole thing, and I'm pretty good with customers, and my dad and I entertained everyone.
Rumor has it that you won Best Cappuccino in Durban at one point.
Yes, 3 years running. From the first year we opened,
That's
2009,
amazing.
2010, 2011. And it was a surprise to us all. I'd been making coffee for 5 months. But like I said, it was, a very different era of coffee in South Africa and especially in KZN. But yeah, it was amazing. It was an amazing experience, like one of the best times of my life in terms of meeting people in that setting, because it's what I always love about being in this industry is, the people are so interesting and they're so interested in coffee. We've done a magazine about it.
Absolutely.
But, it was even at that point, I knew that it's a talking point and something that people connect over. And so I made some of my best friends that I still have today through the coffee shop. And that's where I met Evans and his then business partner, and how we got onto this whole magazine thing.
That's amazing. So that was before the coffee mag was a thing.
Yeah.
You were doing other things, Ian.
At the time,
get into publishing?
at the time that I met Mel, I was publishing a surfing magazine called The Bomb Surf, which was like an underground, pretty hardcore surfers journal. Myself and my business partner would travel the country publishing. I'd been a magazine publisher. I'd worked for Zigzag and Blunt and Saltwater Girl, and SA Paddler magazine was my first job, that kind of thing, off the back of doing my master's degree at UKZN. And I was never supposed to go into magazines. It was always TV. But I couldn't get a job in the TV industry. So I worked in the film industry for a while down in Cape Town, but also parallel to having like a professional sporting career. So I went to the Olympic Games as a hockey player. I went to 2 World Cups. But I had to retire very early in my career. I was 25 when I retired from international sport because I had this media degree. I had to pay back my student loans, and I was based in Durban, and there's not a lot of media companies in Durban, but Atoll Media, which was a magazine publishing company, was, and so I asked them for a job, and they said, look, we don't do TV, but if you're interested in media, you've done the degree, like, come and sell ads for us. So I did. I sold I wasn't even a canoeist or a paddler, but I sold these ads for SA Paddler magazine. Jumped in a canoe, did the doozy, did the fish, like lived the lifestyle. Then Mark Shuttleworth launched Hip to Be Square, a tech youth magazine, and under our stable, I sold ads for that. And then our media company got bought by Touchline Media, which was Media 24. I was like, I don't want to live the corporate life, going to go independent. So we started this underground surf mag. I'd been publishing it for about 2 years. And we used to just work out of coffee shops. So the best coffee in Durban was the Bean Green. And,
Absolutely.
We could go and watch Mel and Pete fight all day while we like
Yes,
read
that
stories.
was one of the jobs.
Created content. And
It was real father-daughter.
So no
You got
TV,
it
just a
all.
live show.
No.
it was a
was
live
just-
show every day. But our routine was...
sitcom vibes, it was
Yeah.
completely, yeah.
It was great. So we'd surf in the morning. We'd come into the coffee shop, have some coffee, talk story, go off, make our media. But, Mel was super interested because she had this journalism degree. So we were like, well, she's obviously interested. Like, so we started to give her bits of the Bomb Surf mag to proofread and copy edits and all these kind of things. And at the time, we were traveling around the country, John and I, surfing a lot and seeing these roasteries pop up, like in Mossel Bay and in J Bay and Plet and the Wilderness. And like, we were like, sheep, is this coffee thing? Also at the same time, that kind of craft beer was starting to get a little bit of momentum. And we were like, oh, and we had big plans. I mean, we were going to publish 7 different magazines under our stable Big Ocean Media Brothers, which took a turn for the worse in quite a dramatic way, but it was a lifesaver in the end. But I said to John, I was like, coffee's going to be, it's the one I like the most. Like, there is potential in this. And surfing, the global surf industry had kind of bottomed out in 2009 quite badly. So like Billabong's share price plummeted from $4 or $5 a share to like 30 cents. And it was a bad time for surfing in the world. So we struggled as a business, but I was like, this coffee thing is good. And so Mel was like, you got to do the coffee magazine. It's good. It's going to be good. So literally, I think we jumped in the car. We drove up to Joburg to the Skaza Nationals in 2012. And we were like, we had an idea for a cover. And I showed it to everyone. I was like,
Was that the beginning of 2012?
it was the beginning of 2012.
Yeah.
And we're like, if we publish this magazine, I said, like, here's my surfing magazine. This is the cover idea for a coffee magazine. Would you support it? And we got like enough ads to put the first one into print. And I took a bit of a loan, from my brother actually, who said, like, I'll fund this thing if you want to do it. He is a chartered accountant, and he was looking at various investments at the time, as like a young deal maker does. And, he gave us the initial capital to do the first print run.
That's incredible.
And that was it. That was literally how we started.
Yeah. I mean, there's lots of other interesting stories in there. It was like the first time we'd met Alessandra Marica.
Yes.
And he's been on board since issue 1. Our longest
Has never missed a magazine.
serving advertiser, and we had a very interesting dinner with him. He did a classic Italian style, took us to an Italian restaurant and like ordered the whole menu, and really grilled us on like why we think we can do this, and what are the values to the industry, and who's it targeted at, and really gave us a shakedown. And but to his credit, really believed in us from the start, and we have so many other amazing people in the industry that have been with us for so long and supporting this idea, like Big George Karatzis.
Yeah.
And
it was interesting because we didn't know this at the time, but I think the coffee industry had never really had a platform that created heroes out of the baristas, the roasters, the equipment guys, the people who are like the lifeblood of this industry, the green bean brokers, like the Carols of this world, And our whole goal was like, because I'm a sports person and I come from a sporting background, like there's rugby magazines, there's cricket magazines, there's a flippin' paddling magazine. Like, come on. Like, there are these baristas who are amazing people. Like, They should be heroes. They are heroes. Like, they make your day. You walk into a cafe and just their energy is like a shot of espresso for your soul. And come on, these are champions. We got to do this.
I love that so much.
Yeah, that was like literally the motivation. And then, from my media background, it was always like educate, inform, inspire. If we can do that with a magazine, a hard copy, like proper thing that's going to sit on the coffee table in cafes, like we've got halfway there. And then it was like, we've got to sell the advertising, and there were actually 2 magazines that had been made, but no advertising had been sold for them. And we only kind of found this out afterwards, but...
not our magazine.
Not our magazine.
Other
There were
people
2
had
other
tried.
ideas.
In the coffee industry?
At the same
Yes,
time.
in the
wow.
coffee
Yeah.
industry. Yeah.
But they couldn't sell the ads. And like my whole career up till that point had been about selling, just selling advertising
He's
space.
pretty good at it.
And so I kind of brought that same approach to the coffee industry, and I was very surprised at how receptive they were, because I think in action sports and sports in general, like the athletes and the people, they expect to be praised and they expect to be heroes, and they have this. But like, coffee's a service industry, and the people are humble and they want to serve you. So when we went to them and we're like, we want to, like, this is the idea, you should advertise because it's going to be good for your business, and these are the ideas, and we're going to put this guy on the cover, and we're going to write a story about these amazing people and humans and coffee. They were like, absolutely, we're in, let's go. And it wasn't an easy sell, because most of these companies weren't used to buying media. So it was first and foremost about having the theoretical conversation about media, marketing, reach, value, leveraging all of these things.
Why you should create budget for this, why you should make space.
And those marketing budgets didn't exist. They existed for trade shows and they existed for events. They didn't exist for any other kind of above the line media. So it was interesting. Like, and as Mel said, like, we've absolutely grown with all of these advertisers, and we haven't had a lot of churn, which is very unique in over a 12-year period of.
I was going to say, we're not talking about 3 or 4 issues. We're talking about 45 issues this time around now.
Yeah, and
Crazy.
We haven't missed an email newsletter, and it comes out every Friday. So we're pretty proud of that. So we take a break for 4 weeks of the year, but we do 48.
That's incredible.
Email newsletters a year, and they've all got paid advertising on them, and Mel creates amazing content in them. Yeah,
I have amazing contributors as well.
Yeah, and so you build this thing together, and that was always supposed to be a community platform. It was always supposed to be about the humans. And it's a funny story, because I remember Simon Lowe, who's a big wave surfer. He lives like right at in Komaki, and he looks at sunset basically. And I bumped into him in Cape Town one day, and he's like, "What? You're not doing the bomb surf anymore?" I was like, "No, I'm doing a coffee magazine now." And Simon's like, what are you going to put in it after you publish the first one? I was like, Simon, it's the same as surfing. It's about the humans. And as much as you know about surfboard shapes and big waves and weather systems, coffee people are the same. It's just a different discourse. So to have unpacked that over 12 years, like we will never run out of content because there are so many amazing humans in coffee.
Yeah, and I think also important to note that we always wanted it to be for a beginner as well as someone who is deeply invested.
Well, I've got a quote from your website.
Carry on.
I think it's from the About page.
Okay, wow.
Which, after reading it, it's hidden at the bottom of of your website. Not hidden, but you have to scroll down. And I would imagine that it hasn't been updated in quite some time. It says, this website and magazine aims to be a platform for communication between the obsessive coffee professionals and the avid coffee drinkers, nurturing a growing coffee community and culture. And if that was written as long ago as what I think it was, I think you guys have hit the nail on the head, because that's what it feels like the Coffee Mag is designed to do, and all the events around the work that you're doing as well. So when hearing that, do you feel like you've so far at this point in your journey achieved what you set out to achieve? Has the magazine fulfilled its purpose so far?
Yeah, I think for me, it absolutely has. And the magazine has always been the cornerstone of the business. The name it's defined as Coffee Magazine. It's not coffee events or, the coffee email newsletter. But what we did find out after 5 or 6 years of publishing it is that there were a lot of projects that we wanted to do in the coffee community that we realized if we don't do them ourselves, they won't ever happen. And those are things like Creative Coffee Week, the Barista Wage Calculator. We did the Latte Art Video Challenge, which took us to 5 different countries, including Japan and Australia and America in 2019, which was a global event based out of South Africa. The
Coffee Magazine Awards.
The Coffee Magazine Awards, so...
Shot in the dark.
A shot in the dark, exactly.
Yeah.
And those all have their own very unique stories and almost like character arcs. They're like little personalities within True North Media, which is our publishing company. But the magazine has always been the cornerstone. And I think it always will be, even though the future of print has been doubted severely, and it's a very difficult medium to make a living out of. It's still so important to us. And, advertisers, for example, will still come back to us year on year and go like, I think this year I'm going to spend all my money on Instagram. And we go, okay, that's cool. However, and when you start to stand up for the value of print, and we see this in Europe and in Southeast Asia, like how revered it is because of the production values of print. It's such a tactile and physically forceful medium, impactful. Like when you open up a double-page spread of an origin photograph with the cherries on the table, the mountains, the sky, and you want to be there, and it makes you feel the same as any subculture does. Like if I see a beautiful surfer getting barreled on an amazing wave, I want to go surfing.
Absolutely.
And that kind of imagery you can't get off a phone screen or a computer screen and the long form read, I think, as a medium. Like you can unpack some deep and significant discussions in a long form read that you can't with the interruptions and the clutter of digital.
I completely agree. And a conversation I had with a cafe partner of ours in Germany a few months ago kind of rings true for me here, because print media has been, in inverted commas, dying over the last decade plus. There are fewer new entrants into the market, certainly, and there are fewer options available to us. So, like, for example, in the surf world, you'll remember how at one point you'd walk into a CNA and you would stand in the magazine section and you'd have your choice of 10 or 15 different publications, a lot of them international. And I remember leaving school, and we lived in Hillcrest, which is probably about half an hour from Durban, and for our international listeners. And my mom would go shopping, so she'd head off to the Pick and Pay, and I'd go to the CNA, and I'd stand there and page through all of the Trans World Surf magazines and the Surfing and Surfer and all of these different publications. Now, when you walk into into a CNA, if they even exist anymore. But if you walk into any retail store, if you find a zigzag, it feels like you've accomplished something. You've found the one last surf publication.
Yeah.
And, Marcus, in this conversation about, doing a multi-roaster cafe in Germany, said the German culture is so anti-entrepreneurship, and it's, well, not anti, but it's so difficult for entrepreneurs, and it's so dumb for him to do what he does, because it actually doesn't make financial sense in many ways. The risk is so enormously high that because it's so hard to do, no one does it, and that leaves space for him to do it. So because no one can do it, he can do it and be successful. And I think it's kind of like that, maybe to a certain
Iain
extent.
says that to me all the time. He's like, what we do is hard. Like, it is difficult to make a print magazine in today's day and age, and we need to always remember that, and that we are, with each magazine, feel like we're really achieving something.
Would you say you'd have to be like Olympian level dedicated to get it done?
Lucky I have one on my team.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I didn't know that, Ian. And like maybe a bit of a segue here. Like,
Yeah.
Holy moly. That is an incredible sporting background. I had no idea. I know you surf, but I had no idea of your hockey career. What was like going to the Olympic Games? That must have been unbelievable.
Yeah, it was wild. So I came from a very hockey-orientated family, the youngest of 3 sons, and I was very competitive. And I just wanted to beat my brothers in the backyard hockey game, cricket match, whatever. And we played all the sports. My mom and dad were ball sports people. So we didn't go on a lot of holidays to the game reserve. We'd be going on sports tour with my parents on their sports tour, and we were knocking around the side of the field. But I achieved quite significantly. I went to Maritzburg College here, just down the road in Pietermaritzburg, which has produced a lot of South African hockey players. And there was a very significant coach there, Mike Bechet, who identified me as a talented young hockey player as I followed my brothers through that school, and a very significant ex-Springbok coach called Brian Puffy Edwards, who ran Midlands hockey here. Who actually coached my mom at SA Varsities. That's how old and long he had been. He's unfortunately passed on since. But Puffy picked me to play men's interprovincial hockey when I was 15, still at boarding school. So I got exposed to Premier League hockey, to interprovincial hockey as a 15-year-old, and I started going on these tours, and I made all the South African age groups from pretty young. I was always playing. I think in my standard 9 years, playing SA Under 21. We played in England inbound series, was my first cap for the SA Under 21 side. And I was the first in my age group. I captained the South African Under 21 team at the Junior World Cup in Hobart in 2001, and I went to my first World Cup in 2003. So I was 22. So I was the youngest of my age group to get a senior national cap. And my elder brother, Steve, was in the national team at the time. So I played every single test match with him, which was awesome. And
That's amazing.
There happened to be an Olympic cycle coming up. And I got picked. We went to the qualifying tournament in Madrid, and we qualified. And, the next thing we were training. We spent 6 months at the High Performance Center in Pretoria before we went to Athens. And that was it. It was like, it happened really quickly. And
Also the Olympics in Greece.
Come on, that is unbelievable.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so, and then it was like...
No. Tell us about the Greek Olympics.
Sure, it was phenomenal. I mean, there were 104 athletes in Team South Africa that year. And it was guys like Greg Nethling, who was a swimmer, and there was History Kluti was jumping high jump. These are like your teammates. You go to breakfast with them, you cruise around the village, and you standing in the queue for hand your laundry in is like Richard Ferranc. He's just won King of the Mountains at the Tour de France the 2 weeks before, and now he's like hanging out, and he's tiny. He's like this little, Richard. Oh, I know you from TV. And you're just seeing these megastars everywhere. Michael Johnson gave a little talk, and I think there were 10 or 12 of us in the room. He was just like, I'm having this talk, guys. Anyone want to come if you're not performing or training? And so I went with my brother and a few of the other guys and sat with him, and went to the gym one afternoon to just have a cycle on a free afternoon, and John Eales was there. He was like helping the Australian team with just like mental motivation stuff, and he pulled in. I was like, oh, John Eels. He's like, who are you? Like, what's your sport? So that's the thing. It's like, because everyone in the village, there's 10,000 athletes in the village, you're there to represent your country. There's obviously mega stars, but like actually everyone there is a star. So a guy like John Eels or Michael Johnson or any of these athletes, the first thing they say to you is like, how's your event going? Or what sport are you here for? So you're already kind of on a level of respect where it's not like you're a person off the street that's a fan, although obviously we're huge fans.
Absolutely.
But there's a level of like,
they're your peers.
you're welcome here, and we're colleagues, or we're both sports people, and it doesn't matter who they are. And yeah, Mia Hamm, who had played, she's still the most capped American football player of all time, would walk into the dining room, people would just stand up and start clapping for her because she's such a legend. And then, just so many like bizarre, amazing pinch me moments. Like I remember walking into the closing ceremony and Roger Federer was standing there, and I was walking with Greg Nicol, one of the best strikers in South Africa, and Beefy Nicol said to him, he was like, hey, Roger, like, how are you? And Roger's mom is South African, so he was immediately, Team South Africa, my second favorite team after Switzerland. Like, how are you guys? How's your competition? Like, what's been happening? He was like truly interested, and you're like, this is too real.
That is unbelievable.
Yeah, it was so cool.
Wow. So it was Athens and the second Olympics?
No, I only went to one. I retired immediately after.
So it was 2 World Cups.
Yeah, 2 World Cups.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
I mean, if you're going to
cool.
pick one to go to, like,
So
look at
cool
the calendar
about
and
World
cherry
of Coffee.
pick Athens.
Going to World of Coffee this year, it was emotional for me because I haven't been back to Athens since 2004. So to go to the Olympics of coffee,
exactly,
after having gone to the Olympics in Athens, almost 10 years later,
and
exactly
you found
10 years
yourself
later.
back on the world stage as a commentator.
I'm sorry, I believe it's 20
years later. Yikes.
not 10.
Yeah, and to be an MC to host that event was very special. It was super cool.
That's amazing. Well, I mean, I hope those listening have learned something new because I had no idea. And we've had so many conversations. So you're a little bit too humble on this side. I think you should have like some Olympic rings tattooed somewhere visible. I'd have them like right on my throat so that, they can't go missed. That's an amazing achievement.
I think that one of the coolest things that's happened as a result of that is World Olympians Association, which is they should have this for coffee actually as well.
Sure.
It's like anyone who's represented their country at an Olympic Games automatically becomes part of the World Olympians Association. And it's about doing good in your community with sport, wherever you might be. And so there's international funding, and it's all about the Olympic values and all those kind of things, which I think, I don't know, I like the coffee industry. I love the coffee industry so much because I think we're such a progressive industry, and we are aligned with they're not Olympic values, but they're their own set of service values and professional values and excellence values.
And do you think you're drawn into the competition side of coffee because of your sporting background as well?
I mean, we've made everything a competition. So yes, 100%. I think we've looked at the coffee industry through a sporting lens almost.
Absolutely.
So, we can't look at a subsect of the industry without thinking, how can we make this a competition?
And that is
in a good way.
Quintessentially South African.
Yes, 100%. But, in a good way. Like, it has meant that we've come up with many ideas that help the South African coffee industry to have something to strive for, or put themselves out there and learn and grow and be excited about meeting people in the industry. And so I think that is, we've tried to create some of that community.
And maybe it's not such a touchy subject. I think it's actually very normal, but the South African coffee industry is very, very diverse. And a lot of the money, when it comes to corporates and I would imagine potential advertisers, are in a very different space to where a lot of the trends we're seeing in coffee are heading. So specialty coffee is growing beautifully around the world. I'm obviously very invested in that space. That's what my business is focused on. But there are a lot of coffee drinkers who don't drink specialty coffee. And there are a lot of businesses who don't operate in that space. I would imagine it to be quite a difficult task to balance advertising revenue and the message and trends that you're seeing happening around the world. And before we get into it, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, I'll give you an example. I had a industry supplier, a good friend of mine, contact me the other day to say that a big Italian coffee bean company, roasting company, was hosting a competition, and he wanted to encourage one of our baristas to get involved in this competition. And if they win, they can eventually go to Italy to compete in a bigger format. And then potentially, if they win that, become an ambassador for this brand. But it's definitely a brand that is not aligned at all to where we see coffee going in the future. So it's a cool opportunity for our barista, but it's not really an association that they want to be linked to, or I would imagine our business benefiting from. And I would imagine that's a sort of micro example of the bigger industry that you guys are playing in. How do you find that balance between working with the old school and kind of where the new school is going?
Yeah, the answer for me is easy, Dario. Like as Coffee Magazine, we will always be as inclusive as possible, and that means if an instant coffee brand wants to advertise with us, we will let them, and we will encourage them, and we know that money that they're paying, even the large fast food chains have advertised with us before. There are a lot of things that you think, well, maybe this is, will this damage the brand of Coffee Magazine? Or will this damage the coffee community? And my answer is no, it won't, because that money allows us to put money in baristas' pockets at the end of the day through the events that we run, through the exposure that we can give them. You take a guy like Winston Thomas, putting him on the front cover of Coffee Magazine. He's told me how many people picked up that cover and they didn't know him before. And I'm talking about mass market people. This is like picking it up in this FMB Slow Lounge, as opposed to someone who's going to come to Bluebird and drink specialty coffee. So you're reaching a mass market, and those kind of opportunities only come from the advertising revenue that you can get. So, and it's also not a blank slate. So if any advertiser or any brand comes to us and says, we want to throw this money at you, but you've got to do it like this, Mel and I will always say, like, we're so flattered that you like our platforms. Let's try and do this in the best way for your brand, in the best way for our brand, and for the best for the baristas, roasters, and the coffee community. And so we will never say no within reason. Obviously, there are social norms and structures that we will not tolerate, definitely. But I think those are very extreme examples. I mean, we're talking about brands of coffee here, mostly, or car brands, or insurance brands, or hotel groups, or whatever they might be. Anybody who wants to invest in our platforms is welcome to, and we won't exclude them, because we know that money allows us to do really good things within the coffee community.
And again, going back to the fact that everyone starts somewhere. So we are always going to have beginners, and some people are still drinking instant coffee. The majority of people in South Africa are still drinking instant coffee. And there's an opportunity, if they see a brand that they recognize in a magazine like ours, that they'll think, okay, well, what are these other brands that are in here? And what are these other things that they're talking about? Because I actually drink this coffee every day, So I think that there's an opportunity there to make the circle bigger, rather than being like, well, we only do specialty coffee, and that's all that we are going to talk about. Because we don't only talk about specialty coffee, and I don't think that we ever will only exclusively, just because there are so many other sections of the market that also have their own stories and people and baristas, and there's so much in those different layers, and perhaps it's not the top end of the market, and it's not in that couple of percent that's the specialty market, but it's still important, and it still adds value to the supply chains and to all the people that are supported by it, and to all the people that drink that coffee every day. So I think that it would be foolish to exclude brands on the basis of they don't meet a certain criteria of specialty, because that's not actually what we're about. We of course love specialty coffee, and it's what we drink on most days, but it's not exclusively what we drink, and we know that it's largely the market that we're talking to that don't exclusively drink specialty, and we'll always be encouraging people to learn and grow. That's always going to be the agenda.
Yeah, and I also think, take Top Gear as an analogy. I think, those guys aren't only interested in the top-end sports cars. They also want to drive a tank and a double-decker bus and a fire engine.
The reasonably priced
Or
car.
see what it can
the
do.
value for money for which,
Yeah.
like what you can get for your best price, or like, it's
and
there's
I think
layers.
people are so, like, every human is so subjective, and everybody has economic, religious, financial, cultural bias, and you will never please all the people all the time. But we know what we believe in, and our agendas are always based around what's the best for the broader coffee community.
That's awesome.
And I think that if you start to lift everyone together, or each layer individually, and like that person moves from a certain brand of instant coffee that has sugar and milk powder in it to a different brand of instant coffee that does not have those things in it, that's also a step up.
It's its own type of progress.
Yes, and and then they are going to try some ground coffee that they bought in the supermarket, and then they'll try maybe have a cappuccino that they never had before, or they'll try the filter coffee rather, or there's so much room for progress and growth, and I think that's what makes the South African coffee industry so exciting, and we should be embracing that. So we should be like, okay, like it's exciting, like there's so much we can do here.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And I have this conversation all the time that we're a few years behind what's happening in Europe and in the US and in Australia. And that's not a bad thing. It's actually very much to our benefit because we get to see what works and what doesn't.
And again, in all those markets, there are also layers.
Oh, 100%.
So, there's in the US market and even in the Scandinavian countries, there will be places that you go that serve bad coffee.
Many more bad coffee cafes than good.
Yeah, 100%. But also that just serve a coffee. Like they don't think too much about it. It's just what they have to get them through the day. It's, and that's okay. That's where we have an opportunity to talk to people.
Absolutely. So I think, we've covered a lot and I really have enjoyed chatting. I would love to know from each of you, how do you drink your coffee every day? And have you had a particular coffee recently, let's say in the last year, anywhere in the world that stands out either from a flavor perspective or maybe a memory perspective in your travels? Is there a coffee that comes to mind as super special? And then how do you drink your coffee every day?
Sure. The favorite one is so tough because I think as the coffee magazine, we are so privileged to get a lot of great coffees come across our desk on the daily. So I think that one for me is too close to call. But I normally wake up and make a double cortado. That's how I start my day. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, I still have a maca pot, and I make a maca pot and a little bit of milk in the mornings. And
the
then
most underrated brewer, even for specialty coffee. I love the results from the maca pot.
And also, it's a very romantic way of making coffee. It makes me feel very connected to like the coffee culture as a whole. But also, only have a couple of coffees a day, so maybe one milky and then maybe a filter coffee, a pour over somewhere in the mid-morning. When I was starting out at the Bean Green, I really overdid it on having too many coffees in a day. I'm sure anybody who's worked in a coffee shop can relate.
Competition season.
Yeah. So, I've pulled it back and now I drink for quality rather than quantity, which is good, I think.
Absolutely.
And in terms of favorites, that's really hard. In terms of experiences, I think one of my recent favorites was when we were in Rwanda and, at the washing stations, they don't drink coffee at this particular washing station that we were at. So we made a Ugandan coffee, in fact, on a mini presso from the kettle that they had in the office for the people who were hosting us, the lovely Joel and Teo. That was awesome, because we were sitting at the washing station, drying tables in the background, our shot-in-the-dark coffee sitting right there, brewing a coffee for these wonderful humans who were kind enough to have us in their space. And that was a special brewing coffee moment, I think.
In fact, we shot the cover shot that's on this issue the cover shot is from that washing station.
Wow.
It was taken a few minutes before we brewed that coffee. So
Yeah.
that was very memorable.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. And the reason I asked the question is, you know, we get to taste a lot of amazing coffee every year. We're very, very fortunate, and we buy a small percentage of what we get to taste. But for me, the most memorable coffee is always linked to an experience.
Yeah,
You know, it's
100%.
the pour over that Alejo made in his QC lab on the farm at Volcan Azul in Costa Rica earlier this year that comes to mind. I can't even remember what coffee it was,
Totally.
but it's the experience. And isn't that what coffee is all about? It's about creating and chasing experiences with people we want to spend time with, and creating community, and it's just incredible. And I think you guys are doing an amazing job at facilitating that through the events, through the website, the publication. And anyone listening to this anywhere in the world can jump onto your website. Is it thecoffeemagazine.co.za?
It's actually magazine.coffee.
Magazine.coffee. Okay. Wow. I didn't even know that. That's amazing. So simple.
Recently updated.
I thought so.
Yeah. We
dropped the .co.za.
and very clean and very simple. So
I love it.
magazine.coffee it is.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, guys, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
We'll
Thanks,
see
Dario.
you at the KZN regionals.
We'll
And
be there.
Safe travels to Dubai. We didn't get into it, but is it Dubai? Yes?
Yes. And Abu Dhabi this time, actually.
Okay, fantastic. So, jump onto the Coffee Mag website and Instagram. I'll link them all in the description of this episode. And safe travels. We look forward to seeing you at the next event. Ciao.
Amazing.
Awesome. Thank you.
you.
Cool. Thank you for joining me for this awesome episode of the Coffee Made Me Do It podcast, powered by Bluebird Coffee Roastery. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. It was a great time sitting down with Iain and Mel. I thoroughly enjoyed myself. I learned a lot about their personal journeys and about what makes the Coffee Mag tick, and certainly what the motivation is behind their publication. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends, like, subscribe, do all the things that you know to do. Give our podcast a 5-star. We're really excited to bring you a load more of these great episodes, great content. We have some awesome people lined up as guests, and it's just a thrill to be able to share this information with you. I'm so excited to learn about people's motivation and passion and drive when it comes to their businesses and careers, and I hope that you're gaining from these conversations. We'll see you in the next one. Cheers for now.